Over the last decade, this British host and comedian has become a mainstay of both journalism and comedy. Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 20 John Oliver moments on Last Week Tonight. For this list, we're breaking down the funniest, most memorable, and most culturally relevant segments from the HBO News satire program. Number 20. Dr. Oz and dietary supplements.
But on Capitol Hill Tuesday, he was on the hot seat.
Excuse me, but any seat Dr. Oz is sitting on is the hot seat.
One of the standout moments of Last Week Tonight's first season is this segment on Dr. Oz, an accredited doctor whose hit show is considered by many in the medical community to be a modern-day version of a traveling snake oil salesman.
Have I got something miraculous for you, ladies and gentlemen? A monkey's paw mixed with 5 petals of a rose and a thimble full of otter semen. Guaranteed to cure your lumbago. Step right up here.
John Oliver covers the doctor's Senate hearing, as well as Oz's use of his profession to legitimize unproven products. However, the deeper focus of the editorial is the lack of regulation concerning dietary supplements, which is the result of the unbelievably legal practice of lobbying.
Dr. Oz is just a symptom of the problem. The disease is the fact that dietary supplements in the US are shockingly unregulated.
Oliver tops the segment off by schooling Dr. Oz and the supplement industry at their own game by showing them how to pander properly, complete with puppies, t-shirts, celebrities, music, and dancing.
Hey, guess what? Here's Steve Buscemi tap dancing.
Number 19. Tobacco.
Is this the best time ever to be a tobacco farmer?
Probably the most profitable.
Wow. So it's an aging product that's decreasing in popularity, and yet somehow it just can't stop making money. It's basically the agricultural equivalent of U2.
Despite its sharp decline in popularity in America, the tobacco industry continues to be profitable, thanks to emerging markets overseas. Last Week Tonight covers the subject, emphasizing tobacco companies' litigation against any attempts to mitigate the marketing of their deadly products, such as the plain packaging laws in Australia, as well as poorer countries such as Uruguay or Togo, who cannot afford expensive court cases.
And when your GDP is only a couple of billion more than the box office of Avatar, a protracted legal case is not really what you need.
The biggest impact of the segment, though, is the introduction of Jeff, the diseased lung in a cowboy hat, a mascot parodying the Marlboro Man.
We are offering Jeff to you, Philip Morris International, to use as you wish.
The show sent Jeff t-shirts to Togo and put up billboards in Uruguay, and Jeff appears whenever you do an image search for Marlboro on Google.
Jeff! It's Jeff, everyone! It's Jeff the diseased lung!
Number 18. The state of journalism. John Oliver may have said that he's not a journalist, but he sure does care about the work that journalists do. He'd already taken a harsh look at the war between advertising and news back in Season 1. Then in Season 3, he devoted a segment to how corporate desire for clickbait stories was killing the viability and integrity of local news.
And what better way to win the trust of your readers than posting first underneath your own article?
This gave him a chance to poke fun at how clueless some conglomerates were, especially when it came to selecting their name. The bit culminated in a parody of the Oscar-winning film Spotlight, imagining it being set in the current journalism landscape.
I think we could prove that they knew.
Yeah, I'm just not sure what kind of clicks we're going to get on that.
Number 17. Sex education.
The conversation that animals in zoos refuse to let you not have.
In this piece, Oliver looks at the state of sex education in the USA, with particular attention given to its inconsistency.
There is no required standard for sex ed in this country. In fact, only 22 states mandate that kids receive it, and only 13 require that the information presented be medically accurate.
Sex and sexuality are something most people will have to deal with at some point in their lives, and Oliver points out the absurdity of America's varying approaches to the subject, which can range from genuinely informative to downright backwards.
Those are the things we do not want to be taught in our schools. Those are things that should be taught in your home.
Wait, taught in your home? Here is an exchange that has never happened. How are you so good at sex? I was homeschooled.
The editorial concludes with a simple, direct look at sex education, parodying the less-than-accurate sex ed videos showcased earlier, narrated by celebrities. This segment is an excellent example of Last Week Tonight's tendency to highlight social or governmental issues that could use some improvement. and doing it in a way that's enlightening and entertaining.
If you get a chance to have sex with this man, go for it.
Number 16, Alex Jones. John Oliver knows how to accept a challenge. When he poked fun at infamous conspiracy theorist Alex Jones as part of a segment on media figures that President Trump listens to, Jones dared him to dig deeper and present a more rounded picture. And that is exactly what Oliver did.
That Alex Jones has repeatedly used his show to fuel speculation that the Sandy Hook massacre was staged by the government, which has been deeply hurtful for the parents of those children over the years.
The comedian devoted an entire segment to Jones, highlighting the fact that most of his InfoWars show is actually about selling his own line of overpriced products with dubious health benefits.
They are coming for you! They're coming for all of us! But first, McGillicuddy's oatmeal.
Oliver even brought out his own fake doctor to endorse fake products, further mocking Jones' questionable credentials. Sometimes, Alex, you get what you ask for. Number 15, Televangelists.
Churches, America's favourite place for redemption and sixth favourite place for chicken.
While it may be hard to believe that they're still around, the show's spotlight on televangelists reveals that they remain fixtures of television, and wealthy ones at that.
I had enough money to buy a beautiful Cessna Citation jet, cash.
I bought a jet, cash. I bought a bigger jet, cash. The haters act happy for me. That's not a sermon, it's the first draft of a Rick Ross single.
Oliver highlights the practices used by the TV preachers to get rich, with particular emphasis on seed faith, which is essentially asking people for money and promising good karma in return.
As an investment, you'd be better off burying your money in the actual ground, because at least that way there is a chance your dog may dig it up and give it back to you one day. Good boy.
He also illustrates the gaping tax loopholes that allow televangelists to get away with their verbal robbery, culminating with a demonstration of the process with the creation of his own short-lived real church, Our Lady of Perpetual Exemption. The church had to close down after people got a little too literal with the seed metaphor.
We are also not closing down because you kept sending us actual seeds, even though we explicitly told you not to.
Number 14, $15 million medical debt payoff. John Oliver isn't afraid to put his money, or at least HBO's money, where his mouth is. To cap off a segment on predatory debt buyers and the need for regulation, he announced that he had formed a debt-buying company and bought $15 million worth of people's medical debt, allowing him to legally demand the full amount owed. Instead, he decided to forgive all of it with the push of a big red button. This $60,000 purchase ended up beating and almost doubling Oprah's record for, as Oliver put it, the largest one-time giveaway in TV history. More importantly, it bought much-needed relief for many people.
It's done! It is done!
Number 13, the 2015 Canadian federal election.
Canada, the country you think about so little, that's it, end of sentence.
Originally airing the literal night before the election was due to take place, this segment focused on explaining the electoral process, while also sharing a few hilarious scandals and detailing the major nominees for Canada's 3 major political parties.
Look, no one is saying that is behaviour worthy of a head of state, but you cannot deny that it is somewhat satisfying to watch a soul-patched man named Justin with a French accent just fall down some stairs.
Oliver pays particular attention to then-incumbent Stephen Harper, whom he calls banal but evil.
Tobacco is a product that does a lot of damage. Marijuana is infinitely worse.
Are you high?
The crowning jewel of the proceedings, however, is Oliver's response to a law forbidding non-Canadians from trying to influence their elections.
That is a ridiculous law, and I guess what you're saying, Canada, is you want to dance?
What follows is an over-the-top request not to vote for Harper, accompanied by music, pantomime animals, and Mike Myers dressed as a Mountie riding a snowplow.
I love Canada, but the fact that it has a law banning outsiders from telling Canadians how to vote is one of the least Canadian things possible.
Sure.
Oh, and don't vote for Stephen Harper.
Exactly.
Number 12, North Korea. While Last Week Tonight may be famous for in-depth takes on domestic issues, Oliver proved that he can also explain and poke fun at hot-button international topics when he devoted a 2017 main story to escalating tensions between the US and North Korea.
Fake news, goodbye!
He started with President Trump's war of words with Kim Jong-un, and then moved on to talk about North Korean culture and life in the dictatorship. Along the way, we learned of the North Korean love of the accordion. So, Oliver invited the most famous accordion player in America, none other than Weird Al Yankovic, to close out the segment with a song.
Please don't nuke us, North Korea. Right now we're all a little tense.
Number 11. U.S. Presidential Scandals.
The 2016 presidential election, or as it's more commonly known, the electoral equivalent of seeing someone puking, so you start puking and then someone else is puking, and pretty soon everyone is puking 2016.
The U.S. presidential election of 2016 dominated news for a few years, and the two candidates' major scandals are examined here in great detail.
This campaign, the scandals have been so pronounced. Polls show that less than half the electorate sees either candidate as honest or trustworthy.
Oliver pays particular attention to Hillary Clinton's scandals, namely her email server and the Clinton Foundation controversy, explaining the complicated details in an understandable and funny way. He then contrasts Clinton's wrongdoing with Donald Trump's, mentioning that over 50% of the Republican statements were found to be false by PolitiFact, and that he has committed far worse far more often and with significantly less scrutiny than Clinton.
If you're irritated by her lying, that is understandable, but he's quantifiably worse.
Oliver finishes the piece off by using an incredibly effective visual demonstration of the difference between the candidates, arguing that while Clinton has more scandals than someone should, they're nowhere near as many as Trump.
And Hillary is a cookie like this one. She arguably has more raisins than average. But we all need to remember that when it comes to Donald Trump, this is the amount of raisins that he represents.
Number 10. Coronavirus. When coronavirus arrived in 2020, almost no other country in the world was hit as hard as the United States.
Can you get the coronavirus by eating Chinese food?
No! No, you can't!
In the beginning, Oliver was quick to criticize the American media and vague government responses to the outbreak in March 2020.
2% of people is a lot when you're talking about those people dying. Think about it this way, 2% of people disappearing was literally the premise of The Leftovers.
While Trump and his administration downplayed the seriousness of the situation, Oliver insisted we take no chances with COVID-19. And his words have aged like milk.
We have contained this, I won't say airtight, but pretty close to airtight.
Well, which is it?
With the virus spiraling out of control in the US late into the summer, Oliver expanded his coverage from home to include the pandemic's effects on essential workers, the unemployed, the incarcerated, and the dangerous spread of coronavirus conspiracy theories.
Why would you close the beach? You've got sequences in the soil, in the sand. You've got healing microbes in the ocean, in the salt water. That's insanity.
Yes, it is. Everything that you just said is insane.
Number 9. The Dalai Lama. John Oliver doesn't do interviews that often, but when he does, he usually speaks with someone quite noteworthy. We're talking Dalai Lama level noteworthy, or in this case, the actual Dalai Lama. After explaining the Tibetan spiritual leader's role and the problems China is causing with his succession, Oliver played the interview he had conducted with the prominent Buddhist in exile in India.
You don't, to me, look like an evil wolf.
The pair touched on serious topics like Tibetans self-immolating in protest of China and the possibility of the current Dalai Lama being the last, before Oliver lightened the mood by presenting his guest with a calculator watch.
Roosevelt may have given you a fancy watch, but that is water resistant.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Number 8. The 2015 FIFA corruption case.
The World Cup is one of my favourite things, but it's organised by these guys. FIFA.
Few subjects have received as many segments devoted to it on Last Week Tonight's first few seasons as FIFA, the organization in charge of international football, and the corruption charges against its officials.
And we have to remain a non-profit organization.
A non-profit with over $1 billion in the bank.
Yeah, but this is a reserve.
A reserve? A reserve of $1 billion.
John Oliver's passion for the sport is really evident throughout all of the coverage. and the various pieces are easily some of the best the show has ever put out. Some highlights include Oliver promising to endorse products he finds gross or tacky if their companies pull their sponsorships from FIFA, which he delivers on, and his memorable feud with former FIFA Vice President Jack Warner, which included purchased airtime on Trinidad TV and an announcement accompanied by dramatic music and jets of fire.
You have magnificent music under yours. Well played. Well, I see your music choice, and I raise you fire!
Number 7. We got him. Even at his most ridiculous, Oliver can be quite serious. In what is becoming a recurring bit, he uses the comedy trope of an over-the-top though premature celebration to declare, "We got him," when he catches President Trump in a lie. After the marching band or basketball dunking tiger come out, he tells them to stop because Trump is still president.
Thanks for coming in. I'm sorry, he's great. So, I'm sorry, guys. That was great, though, but thanks very much. He is still president, so...
This helps Oliver make the point that the benchmarks for what will end a political career keep moving, and what would have tanked a presidency months ago won't anymore. Number 6. Government surveillance.
I realise most people would rather have a conversation about literally any other topic, including, is my smartphone giving me cancer, to which the answer is probably, or do goldfish suffer from depression, to which the answer is yes, but very briefly.
Government surveillance in America is a frightening and uncomfortable subject, but also one that John Oliver handles with grace.
Section 215 is overseen by a secret intelligence court known as the FISA Court, and they've interpreted it to mean the government could basically collect and store phone records for every American, the vast majority of whom, of course, have no connection to terrorism.
He focuses primarily on detailing what programs like the Patriot Act allow the US government to do, as well as Edward Snowden's leaking of the information that revealed the scope of the government's reach, while also touching on the public's surprisingly blasé attitude about surveillance. Half of the piece's runtime is devoted to Oliver traveling to Russia to interview Snowden himself, which made headlines around the world.
How much do you miss America?
You know, my country is something that travels with me, you know. It's not just a geography.
Well, that's already a way too complicated answer. The answer is, I miss it a lot. It's the greatest country in the world.
Despite being a comedian first, Oliver managed to ask plenty of tough questions of Snowden, while maintaining an air of humor.
EO 12333 is what the NSA uses when the other authorities aren't aggressive enough or they're not catching as much as they'd like. For example...
Okay, so how are they going to see my...
Number 5. Net neutrality.
We need you to get out there and for once in your lives, focus your indiscriminate rage in a useful direction.
Not only can John Oliver mobilize his fans, he's also pretty good at getting those who don't like him to take action, provided they have a common interest. He proved this twice, both times with a hilarious and informative defense of net neutrality. After comparing putting lobbyists in charge of regulation to hiring a dingo babysitter, he challenged everyone to comment against a two-tier internet.
It's almost as if they've agreed to stay out of each other's way like drug cartels.
Then, in a 2017 follow-up, he mocked FCC Commissioner Ajit Pai's jumbo coffee mug and plugged a URL that took people directly to the FCC comment page.
Instagram models, Tom from MySpace if you're still alive. We need all of you, even, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, Donald Trump's internet fans on sites like 4chan and Reddit.
Both times, the FCC website crashed. Number 4. The Brexit Referendum.
The United Kingdom, birthplace of the Beatles, and yet very much the world's Ringo.
Brexit, the nickname for the June 2016 referendum, in which voters decided whether the UK should exit from the European Union, has been controversial and financially tumultuous.
Brexit doesn't sound scary, it just sounds like a granola bar you buy at the airport. Hey, this tastes like a preserved owl pellet. It, I'm going to Cinnabon. You pushed me into it.
John Oliver covered his homeland's referendum before it was actually held. In the segment, he explains the basics of what the European Union is, identifies its proponents, examines their arguments, and points out their party's history of xenophobia and nationalism.
Just hold up, not British enough to be in our parliament. He's talking about a British citizen who was born in London and raised in Hampshire. How is that not British enough?
Like many other Last Week Tonight stories, this one wraps up with a musical number, this time in the form of a plea for Britain to remain with the EU, while still insulting it, as sung by a barbershop quartet. It's not often you hear young boys belting curse-laden songs about economic unions. Number 3. Prison. This early Oliver segment really set the tone for quite a few long-form reports to follow. It took a serious subject, in this case, the staggeringly high rate of incarcerations in the US bolstered by the private for-profit prison system, and explored it with cold hard facts, examples of the human side of the story, and, of course, the host's unique wit.
50 deaths! At this point, you could hire the people who pretend to be doctors on Grey's Anatomy, and you would probably have a lower mortality rate.
Oliver closed the segment by calling back the fact that Sesame Street was now talking about prison, before interacting and singing with his own version of Muppets about the topic.
Our prison population is bigger than Slovenia.
'Cause we put people in jail instead of treating schizophrenia.
Informative, insightful, and funny. This bit is Oliver at his finest. Number 2. Donald Trump.
Our main story tonight, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, is Donald Trump. And I say that knowing that every time his name is said out loud, he has a shattering orgasm.
While John Oliver and Last Week Tonight have tackled Donald Trump numerous times, this in-depth look at the then frontrunner for the Republican Party nomination for U.S. presidency is by far the most successful and the most biting.
Donald Trump views the truth like this lemur views the Supreme Court vacancy. I don't care about that in any way.
Oliver debunks Trump's biggest selling points: his temperament, his honesty, and his success, none of which are as substantial as Trump claims, while also highlighting the candidate's dangerous inconsistency when it comes to policy.
I don't know David Duke. I don't believe I've ever met him. I'm pretty sure I didn't meet him, and I just don't know anything about him.
Really? That's your best answer there, because you definitely know who he is. Partly because you called him a bigot and a racist in the past.
However, what elevates the piece is when Oliver hits Trump somewhere he actually values: his name, which is also his brand. Oliver reveals that the alleged billionaire's family name used to be Drumpf, a moniker that he feels is much more befitting of the ignorance, bluster, and incompetence of the man himself.
And it may seem weird to bring up his ancestral name, but to quote Donald Trump, he should be proud of his heritage.
Before we unveil our number 1 pick, here are some honorable mentions. The wealth gap.
Our main story tonight is income inequality. A good way to figure out which side of it you're on is whether you're currently paying for HBO or stealing it.
Police brutality.
To any viewers sitting at home shocked by the scenes of police brutality, I get it. I'm white too. But it's worth remembering that's the tip of a very large iceberg. It didn't start this week or with this president, and it always disproportionately falls on black communities.
Miss America.
Question number 1. What does the continued existence of the Miss America pageant say about how women are viewed in America? You have 20 seconds. Go.
Beginning with the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848 that spurred first wave feminism, the perception of women in America has always been complex and fluid.
Catheter ad.
I'm a professional cowboy and I use catheters. Been cowboying for 25 years and there's 2 things I know. I don't like pain when I cath. And healthcare is a complicated business. Everybody knows that. Literally, everybody.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Coal. We all figured John Oliver would be sued one of these days. Oliver, though, knew exactly what bit was likely to prompt legal action, and shared the info with the audience during this segment. When talking about the bleak future for coal mining jobs in America, he brought up a cease and desist letter the show had received from Murray Energy's lawyers, and went on to talk about the company's CEO, Robert Murray, anyway.
So I have to proceed with caution. I'm not going to say, for instance, that Bob Murray looks like a geriatric Dr. Evil.
Within days, Murray's lawyers launched a defamation suit against Oliver and HBO. Apparently, the segment's squirrel mascot, Mr. Nutterbutter, was not named as a co-defendant. Oliver went on to win the defamation case against Murray, which served as the perfect introduction for a 2019 episode on strategic lawsuits against public participation.
Trump sued that man for $5 billion. And think about that. That means if Trump had won that lawsuit, he would have been worth $5.2 billion.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojo. And be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.